person to chair the meeting.
Thank you. We have, under our interlocal agreement, a chair, vice chair, and the secretary position. They're filled by individuals, and since none of those individuals are present to run the meeting, you all need to, amongst yourself, decide and appoint somebody who can run the meeting. We have a quorum. We can continue to act without their presence, but somebody does need to officially take the position of chair just for this particular meeting.
I've got a great idea. Doug, you're about in the middle of us all. You've been on many boards, so I move that Doug Bornick chair this one.
I'll second the motion to get in order to get it rolling.
This will be brief.
I don't know who says all in favor.
I'll jump in that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. You got a pirate for a chairman. Here we go. All right, let's start off with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I just wanted to make a comment. It just dawned on me coming here to this meeting, the aftermath of the hurricane was in my lifetime the most democratic, impactful hurricane or event that I know of in the Peninsula of Florida's history. And studying a lot, I'm sure a lot of you know the history of Florida and have read books like I have. And the only other event that I know of that impacted the entire peninsula at this uniformly was the 1898 freeze event that put ice on the Miami River. Animals fell out of trees, stone dead from that event. It was a 3-day freeze event, and I'm in agriculture, and everything that was planted in Florida froze. And so that was an event that affected every county from Jacksonville to Homestead. And this was an event that affected everything from Key West to Jacksonville. In every county, every grower I know of in agriculture, of any commodity, sugar, cattle, everything, everybody suffered from the flooding or the wind event. So anyway, I'm just glad we're all getting through this, and it's impactful to the lagoon, impactful to the St. Johns River, every water body, everybody in the peninsula. So we're all hurting, and since we represent the Indian River Lagoon, it's equally bad for us, and even worse because of all the drainage that's coming into the lagoon. I can assure you on the St. John's side, we're doing everything, and I know DEP is doing the same, and I'm South Florida. I was at the RAC meeting. Every plumbing option possible is being done to help this lagoon, I can assure you. Every asset, every bright thought of putting water but anywhere but in the estuaries and out of harm's way is being done. So just wanted to start the meeting with that thought. With that, are there any agenda revisions?
Mr. Chair, we had a request to move 7B consent, the ideas contract, to new business, and so staff's requesting that become 9B new business.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll go on to item number 3, resolutions, recognition letters, and awards. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Sorry about that. Then we move on to item number 3, resolutions, recognition letters, and awards.
We have deferred those awards until our all-hands meeting in December. In recognition, everybody said, kind of keep this meeting moving because we're all super busy in post-storm. And so we've just pushed all of that into our next meeting.
And then on to item number 4, public comment. All right, first one up is George Chappis. George?
Do I stand right here?
Right there. Yeah.
My name's George Chappis. I'm here representing some new technologies. I've been working with Dr. DeFries on presenting technologies to help with the lagoon issues, St. Lucie River issues, algal bloom problems. I'm here representing my own company, Clean Water Compliance. I'm also representing Clear Water Plasma, Sanjeev Jakit and John Adwasny. I'm also helping represent Andrew Hyatt regarding now the different technologies. What do we do? I have a nanobubble technology that will oxygenate the water down below to eliminate the bacteria that create the smell, the algal bloom proliferation. Sanjeev's company will eliminate the bacteria and the harmful toxins, you could say, that come out of process. And he will also help to increase the oxygen content of the water. The big issue is dissolved oxygen levels become too low, sulfur-reducing bacteria take over and create the smell and the fish kill and contribute to this. Andrew's company in the dewatering operations can help to remove metal contaminants, encapsulate them, prevent them from leaching into the water. In my opinion, I've been in the water business for 35 years. There is no one single technology. I know that Mr. Eggers is here, who I met with, that also has a technology that removes the nutrients from the water, and you would like to get involved with him in other projects, but also that helps big time take the nutrient nitrogen, nitrate, and phosphorus out of the water. He's had successful tests in the past that Dr. DeFries is aware of, and that's pretty much it. I just want to make you aware also that these are local companies, you know, within your county. With that, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to present. And I left Dr. DeFries with several documents and have had numerous long phone calls with him, conference calls with myself and Andrew. So thank you for your time.
Sure. All right, next up, and I apologize in advance, John Adwasny.
That was very good.
Is that close?
Odwasny, yes, sir. So to the committee members, I appreciate the opportunity to come, and as a segue to what George was talking about, I would like to introduce Clearwater Plasma, which is a local company out of Palm City. We've been processing very difficult water streams out of the oil and gas sector for difficult applications that are complementary to what the problems that we have on the local side exhibit. So the technology is a local technology. It deals with advanced oxidation, which is a chemical-free process to eliminate nutrients in the water. It oxygenates the water. We have processed many algal applications, algal bloom applications in difficult waters in the Midwest. It's proven technology. And it's, I think, the big issue that we have, excuse me, are the incredibly high volumes of water that we have to process in this area. And this technology, by far, is the highest volume, lowest cost application for treating very difficult waters. So I think the purpose of the main issue that we have is I brought some technical literature and some brochures, and then after the presentation, if you have interest, we can discuss this. But it's local technology, and we cater to the problems that we're dealing with here on a local basis. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Next up is Bob Steeman. Bob? Your handwriting is just about even with mine, Bob, just about there. I'm right there with you.
Thank you. I've worked on that for a long time. As an old car mechanic, it gets worse every day, I think.
Mine too.
My name is Bob Steven. I live here in Sebastian. I saw you guys a few months ago. I got really, really sick here. I was sprayed with Diquat 2,4-D, maybe with a little glyphosate mixed with it. The wind was strong. The 2 airboats that were shooting this stuff with fire hose type apparatus didn't know I was on my roof cleaning my gutters, and I got a good blast of it. Well, I got sick, hospitalized. I couldn't get better. The lung doctor said, go north, so I went to New Hampshire. I was feeling pretty good after a month or so. I just got back. I was without breathing apparatus and stuff. And I looked out my window, and the big lagoon in front of my house was green. The birds were starting to think about coming back. It looked like the old Florida. I went, success. Back up, I had gotten everybody I could involved in what had happened to me in the Department of Agriculture come out and swabbed my house. A bunch of other agencies got involved. I'm sure there was some sort of heat and conversations, and the city stopped spraying. I thought it was going to be good. We were ready to go forward and help the city figure out how we're going to clean up the waterways, keep the waterways flowing without chemicals. 2 weeks after I'm back, 2 airboats show up with new mufflers on them and quietly proceed to douse my front of my house, my lawn, and all the stuff around. I don't know what they were spraying. I went down, looked at the truck. It had gallons of glyphosate on their side, empty. I'm sure that it was probably Diquat 2,4-D and glyphosate mixed, but I can't prove that. They won't give me the MSDS sheets. They won't mark their boats. What we had from the Department of Agriculture was that they're not telling us when they're spraying, and according to their contract and their permit, they're supposed to tell us when they spray this stuff so I can get out of my house. Now, I've asked, the agency on special needs, I'm talking to some of the people about the elderly in the state with special needs, that they're supposed to tell me these things so I can move, right? I don't know where I'm going to move to, but get out of the house for a week or so. And they're not doing that. So I just want to tell you that the city of Sebastian is continuing to dump hundreds of gallons of glyphosate, Diquat 2,4-D, and whatever other nasty things Monsanto's and their chemical engineers decide are best to kill weeds. Let's back this up a little bit. When we were at the symposium last year, the year before, they took pictures of the Indian River Lagoon and all the waterways going into it, and you can see the scars from in front of my house, all the way out to the St. Sebastian River, all the way down to the lagoon and down the edge of the lagoon where the seagrass is gone. These chemicals kill the grass. They do a good job, too. Please, come to my house, anybody. 150 Concha Drive. You're welcome to come out there. I have a huge waterway in front of my house where 2 big waterways meet. The perfect example to study Mother Nature. Mother Nature's gone right now. Last spray, these big birds know, and they left. It's a terrible thing that's going on. We're killing ourselves. Last thing I'm going to say is, I'm a car guy, and when the manufacturers couldn't fix the cars, they would throw it at us in the field and say, it's a field project. And we would project manage the thing. I think we need to project manage a few small entities here. I love what you're doing with getting sewers there and doing the big things, but those are big projects that are going to take years and years and years. Like the old doctor told me up in the mountains one day when I hurt myself real bad on picking a motor up. I said, geez, that kills me when I go like that, Doc. And he was sitting behind a desk like you were, far away from me, because he didn't want to get sick. He looks at me and says, what should I do? He says, well, I could spend $1 million on that shoulder, or don't do this. The last thing I want to say is that I can just think of, and I really appreciate everything you do, Dwayne, your people, all of you guys. But it reminds me of the old joke somebody told me. I don't know what kind of meeting it was, but there's a jetliner leaving Boston heading towards the Antarctic someplace. They're up in the air for a couple hours. A pilot gets on the air. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're enjoying yourself. I've got good news and I've got bad news." He says, "The bad news is that we're lost. But the good news is we got a tailwind and we're making up time." So let's not get caught up in that. We do need to work on sewerage and the big projects and try to fight big sugar and all that other stuff. But let's try to do something we can do. Let's project manage something, anything. Stop spraying glyphosate and Dicot 2,4-D on your subsidiaries that are feeding our rivers. It's killing everything. Please come to my house. My lung doctor said I've got to leave again. I'm going back to New Hampshire Monday. I'll tell my wife that the house is open to any of you that want to come. But in 2 weeks, they'll be spraying again, and I hope not to be here. I tried to fly out of Orlando yesterday, and they said because of my breathing, they wouldn't let me fly out. Okay? I get sick immediately from Dicot and 2,4 and glyphosate. I now have an allergy against poisons. Isn't that odd, huh? So, my point to you, listen to Ed. He's been telling us for a couple of years now. Stop spraying this garbage. We can do it without it. Mr. Cox has shown us different ways. There are actually good ways to do it. We can actually get paid to do it. We can put some men to work doing it. We don't need the poisons. I'm done. Thank you.
All right, and next up is Bob and Musa. I can't read your writing here. M-U-S-S-A? Bob, what's your last name?
Musser.
Musser.
Yeah, if possible, if I could, my comments are specific to agenda item 6B.
Yep.
Could I provide comments after or during the discussion period?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, on to item number 5.
Mr. Chair, if I may just
Sure.
make, I wonder, Dwayne, if it might be useful if the 3 or 4 gentlemen here that are proprietary providers maybe can give you some information so that we can see if some of these things might be useful for us to look at more closely. Second, for the gentleman that has the problems with the sprays, I'm very sympathetic. I'm terribly allergic to those things as well. And it does seem to be overwhelming in that those herbicides do affect the grasses far beyond where we anticipate in much more minute quantities than we anticipate. That's part of the difficulty is the contra information that is available. While it doesn't come directly from Monsanto, it comes from their folks. So that's the complications that we're faced with. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. On to committee reports. Martin, you're up.
Good morning. I'm Marty Smithson, co-chair of the management board, and I was able to, or asked to chair the meeting on Tuesday because our chair, Bob Ulovich, is taking retirement way too seriously.
Yes, he is.
And, but I had the pleasure. We had a very good meeting on Tuesday, and it was had a lot of lively discussion. It was good to have everyone there after the storm, have everyone back together, or storms, I should say. The board accepted the management conference committee reports that you'll hear some details on more this morning. So all those were accepted. The most discussion was stimulated by the report from the Water Management District on the Indian River Lagoon flushing study, the feasibility study. That, and you're going to hear the presentation on that in more detail, but I just wanted to share with you some of the comments from the management board. It was not an action item, but there was a motion that was made and accepted by everyone that this is a technology that should be taken a harder look at, so we wanted to keep it on the table. But there was a lot of concerns and a lot of issues that were discussed. You know, it's an expensive pilot project, and you're going to get the details on that. It's not anywhere in the NEP budget at this time. There's a focus on the priority measures for restoration, nutrient removal, muck removal, septic, sewer, stormwater. So right now it doesn't fit within that priority matrix, and so the discussion was that, you know, we need to not have something come in and disrupt that, but let's keep the focus, but let's don't take this off the table yet either, because it does have some merit for some maybe regional or smaller scale restoration type efforts. And in Flushing, and we had a good discussion with Jim David from St. Lucie County that talked about his success with that type of, whether it's passive or using pumps, that it does have a lot of benefit in a localized area. So it may not be the answer to the whole lagoon-wide thing, but let's look at it as a restoration activity. So we're really looking forward to hearing the Water Management District's report today. I think you're going to enjoy it because it was very technical, and they did a thorough job, really good job. Other items that are before you today that were also accepted by the board, and that includes the EPA's 5-year evaluation of the program review, and the board was really pleased with the positive comments that were made by EPA. I mean, that shows this work that the small staff is undertaking and completing and getting this program really tied together very well. And I think EPA recognizes that and congratulated them on that. The board accepted that report and also the recommendations for restructuring, or no, I'm sorry, recommendations for continuing forward with possibly some help to the staff. And so, yeah, I saw my note here. It said program restructuring was one of the things that was really, a positive that's happened in the last couple of years. So that's about it from the board. It was, like I said, good meeting, really positive.
Bob would be proud, Martin.
Yeah.
It's nice and brief.
He wouldn't recognize it.
That's a personal comment there.
Said he would not recognize it.
Right. All right. Up next, Chuck with committee report on STEM.
Thank you. Chuck Jacoby, the chair of the STEM AC. Our last meeting was pushed due to the storm, but I did want to report to you that I think, we had an example of the process working, as it were, the management conference and the way we go about doing things. So at the previous STEM meeting, we spent hours, literally, going over some of the information that's going into the reasonable assurance plan being developed for Mosquito Lagoon. And an outgrowth of that was myself and one of my colleagues were invited to come and speak to the stakeholders at their last face-to-face meeting. And we talked about the kinds of information we collect on seagrasses, how we use it, what it tells us. And although I don't think we assuaged everyone's concerns, we assuaged some of the concerns. And I think we helped to move that process forward. So I'm just basically saying, this concept of bringing people together seems to be doing the job.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. Next up, the CAC committee report from Frank. Frank?
Mr. Chair, we have no report from the CAC other than a quick update that they are very excited to kick off the small grants program in this fiscal year.
Okay. We move. Do we need a motion to accept the committee reports? Carolyn, no? Okay. Item number 6, water quality and post-Hurricane Irma assessment. Chuck, you're back up. Just stay real close to the microphone.
It's good exercise. You can use it, I can tell you. Yes, so the hurricane definitely disrupted some of our efforts. Sampling has been disrupted. One of the main reasons is our laboratory was flooded, and so they're working to refurbish the laboratory and make it safe for the workers to go back in. The same happened to the governing board room, so they're working on that as well.
They got a new odor.
Yeah. So And then after that, the weather sort of delayed a lot of the field work because it was so windy and the staff couldn't really operate on the water. The water is still very high in the lagoon, most places. We did lose some of our continuous monitoring gear. The one at Titusville went down. The one at I-113 or the 528 Causeway also is leaning at this point. And the one further south at O'Galley Causeway actually disappeared. So it's on the bottom somewhere. They think they found it, and they'll be trying to recover it coming up. But we do have some information from the one in Mosquito Lagoon, the one in Banana River Lagoon, and the one down near Vero, north of 60. And so what we saw, generally speaking, was salinities did drop, as you might expect, with the storm. Mosquito Lagoon dropped the least, only about 6 parts per thousand, whereas others dropped more like up to about 10 or so. So salinities have come down a bit. Temperatures also came down, which again you might expect. Most of them came down about 9 degrees Fahrenheit.
Sure.
So they're down around the upper 70s, whereas they were up in the upper 80s.
Right.
That's good news in the sense of generating phytoplankton blooms, because the warmer the water, the faster those things reproduce. And in fact, chlorophylls have tended to be relatively low, although spiky, and I'll go through some information about this past summer overall with some of the reports on phytoplankton. But they're generally down below 20 in most places, which is good. 30 is certainly where we begin to worry. 20 is not too bad, and in some places they're down around 10 or 15 micrograms per liter, which is good. Dissolved oxygens have stayed relatively high most places, above 4 up to 5. So except in canals and things where, again, you have different situations, but in the main stem of the lagoon, dissolved oxygen's been pretty good this summer. Secchi depths changed after the storm, so they were actually very good before the storm, around 4 foot. But after the storm, most of them came up to about 2 foot. So again, you had things going on. You got turbidity, you have fresh water and color and other things that are affecting secchi depths. So what I wanted to do is just give you a little update. We get a lot of questions about seagrasses, and that's what this first slide is about. Are you guys okay? So as you know, we map seagrasses about every other year, and we went back to 1943. And those green bars are the acres of seagrass that we've seen in the whole lagoon, including our partners in South Florida. And that's the green bars. And you can see, as we've talked about in the past, that the acres of seagrass rise till around 2009. And then the 2011, that's just as the superbloom was taking hold. So you can see we lost acres. We had a little bit of increase in both 2013 and 2015, with most of that actually turned out to be fairly early. The blue line is something that correlates really well with acres, and that's the length of the transects, the distance offshore. When they run these lines perpendicular to shore and look at the seagrasses, this is the extent that seagrasses go offshore. And that correlates really well with acres. And we do that every year at about 97 different places in the summer and the winter. These data come from the summer only, which is what we expect to be like the maximum extent of the seagrasses. And you can see that it tracks those green bars reasonably well. And you see the drop in 2011, and you can see that it actually decreased a little more in 2012. And that's because of the timing of the superbloom. We mapped the seagrasses at the beginning, and obviously it had an effect during and caused the grasses to recede some more. Again, you see the increase coming up to 2015. 2016, that was the large brown tide in a lot of places and other problems, and you see a decrease again in transect length. 2017 maps are being processed as we speak, but you can see from the transect data, which is this past summer's transect data, that we don't expect a major increase in seagrasses. In fact, we expect that possibly we'll see fewer acres than in 2011. So that's the seagrass story at this point. Then I just wanted to walk you through information on phytoplankton blooms this summer. So this comes in part, a large part from the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and a variety of volunteers who take samples off their docks and send them in to get analyzed. So you'll see the points where you see the reports from tend to be the same. So this is not a synoptic view of the lagoon. And the way I view these is to look at how many points there were and where they were located, just to get some idea of an intensity of blooms that have been going on. And I'll focus in, so at the southern end is Sebastian. So I'll focus in on this northern part, although there is one slide that shows you some down by St. Lucie. And what we tried to show you here are the types of blooms that we've been seeing this summer. So the reddish symbols, that's the pyridinium, that's the dinoflagellate, the one that causes the bioluminescence that everybody loves to canoe through in the nighttime. The Sunonitia and other diatoms, they're diatoms, that's the yellow. Fish kills are the little fish symbol. The blue symbol is the blue-green algae. So we have picocyanobacteria, as we call them, and there were a few blooms of those, but not the way that we saw in the superbloom. That was a major component of the superbloom. And then there's the chlorophyte, the small greens, and that includes some of the brown tides as well. So you can see that we have a kind of a mix of diatoms and the dinoflagellate blooms in June. In July, the locations changed a little bit. Here it's predominantly the pyridinium, the dinoflagellate, and a few fish kills. Again, mainly minor fish kills, not huge fish kills, and typically up near canals and places where oxygen levels tend to fall. August, things heated up a little bit, and you begin to see a little bit more of a mixture. So you get some of the blue-greens and a little bit of the greens mixed in with the dinoflagellates and the diatoms. And you can see there were more fish kills, particularly sort of that portion where Banana River meets the Indian River Lagoon. This is a different view of August, and you can see that the pyridinium, the dinoflagellate, extended all the way down to the St. Lucie. So there's a pyro bloom reported from down at St. Lucie in August as well. September, things were a little sparser. One reported fish kill, mostly pyridinium, a little bit of blue-greens. And then the results from October up until a few days ago, again, mostly pyridinium. So what we saw, I guess I would say, is a little bit like 2014, where we had patches of phytoplankton that were blooming, but we never saw them coalesce. And that's probably characteristic of the type of phytoplankton that we see. So the dinoflagellates and the diatoms are larger, and they don't tend to form the intense blooms that you get from the very small organisms, which churn over much faster, come in much higher numbers. Although we did record the highest ever pyridinium count of 633,000 pyridinium per milliliter, which is like a bit of an ounce. So it was pretty impressive concentrations where they were. But that's been the summer here. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chuck? Nope. Thank you, Chuck. Now for my favorite county, Deb Drum.
That's quite a distinction, how the pressure is on, right?
Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Good to see everybody. Deborah Drum, Ecosystem Manager for Martin County, just to provide you a little bit of an update on water conditions in our part of the lagoon. For September, the Water Management District's district-wide rainfall just for September surpassed the September average by over 6 inches. And so that was just for the month of September in 2017. You can see the amount of rainfall that we've had in this area. This is anything in this blue, darker blue color is 200 to 300% of average rainfall, and that was for the month of September. And this light blue color, that's 150 to 200%. You'll see in our area, we kind of were spared a lot of the really heavy rainfall in Martin County. We were, in that 120 to 150% of average, and we were the dry side. So just to kind of give you some perspective, so over 13 inches of rain district-wide, 190% of average rainfall for the month, and more than 8 inches of that was attributed to Hurricane Irma, to give some perspective on that. And we are pretty full up. We've got a lot of water that we're dealing with statewide, and it's not looking any better for October at this point in time. So right now, as I stand here, October rainfall is 2.84 inches. That's 220% of the average rainfall. And so the climate predictions that we have for the next month or for above average rainfall. So that's what we're looking at. So we continue to look at a massive amount. I'll just go back one real quick second here. All this water in the Kissimmee is finding its way down to Lake Okeechobee, and it continues to get rainfall now. It's just really a lot of water that we're talking about. So this is a spoiler alert for the slides I'm about to show you. So the rainfall from Hurricane Irma resulted in serious flooding statewide. This is a flooded community along Shingle Creek west of Lake Toho in the Kissimmee area, just to let you see what was happening in all areas of the state of Florida, especially in that upper area that flows into Lake Okeechobee. Upper East Coast operations, the district was releasing after the hurricane and continues to release as much water as they possibly can through S49, S97, and S99, which are associated with the C24, 23, and 25 canals. A lot of that finds its way into the North Fork of the St. Lucie River, and it finds its way into the estuary and out the inlet. This photo right here is a picture of the Gordy Road structure, which overtopped during Hurricane Irma. And the Water Management District, after the storm, they did utilize the 10 Mile Creek Reservoir following the event, which was there's just more good news that comes with looking at when everybody can work together and get a project online like 10 Mile Creek. That was a huge success. I know for St. Lucie County, that has been a huge push and a really big deal for them as well. So we applaud those efforts. Our current conditions, the lake yesterday, today it's at 17.19, today it's at 17.20. It's been hovering around that level for the last couple of 3 days, but then you get up and it's raining again. So we're looking at seeing when the lake might peak. We're hoping it's now. This is the last time that Lake Okeechobee stage was this high was in October of 2004, and the lake increased 3.5 feet from Irma rainfall, and the associated runoff, inflows, and the October rainfall that I just showed you a picture of. So 3.5 feet is not trivial on Lake Okeechobee. It takes a whole lot of time to get that amount of water out of Lake Okeechobee. The Army Corps did commence maximum practicable releases to the St. Lucie Estuary on September 15th and followed on September 19th to the Caloosahatchee Estuary. What maximum practicable releases means is that they put as much water through those through the canals as they possibly can to the east and west coast, given the downstream conditions. So as you know, we've had these king tides, and we've also had at the same time a weather event that was pushing water, at least on our coast, into the east coast. Yeah. And so with king tides, you had about 1.5 feet of additional water that was coming from surge. Right. So we're getting, our phones have been, I know Virginia was in the same boat, our phones are lighting up with people saying, what are you doing? You're flooding us. And that's Mother Nature. There's no water management that is handling that kind of flooding that we're seeing in some of these low-lying areas along the coast. So yesterday, S80 was releasing about 4,600 cubic feet per second. And of course, that number, that's an average, and that varies with tides. So sometimes it's 2,000, sometimes it's 6,000. And that's been about the range. But for the average, it was about 4,600 cubic feet per second. I think the Caloosahatchee is getting something like 9,000, just to give some perspective on how much more water they're getting on the west coast. And so, yeah, as I mentioned, our flows range from just 1,100 to about 4,850 is kind of the range to create that average. What that equates to is 770 million to 3.1 billion gallons of water a day going into the St. Lucie Estuary under that scenario. A really important point to provide some perspective on this. As much as this water sounds like, about that volume of water, 10% of it is coming from Lake Okeechobee. And the rest of the 90% is coming from the local basins. That is a function of our basins being extremely large, and they never historically flowed out to the St. Lucie. Those basins' waters flowed differently in the past. And so what I always like to remind people is that even though 10% of Lake Okeechobee water sounds like a small thing, relatively speaking, it's still a massive amount of water. And when you put that on top of the basin flows that we already get, it exacerbates an already really dire problem that's been long identified in the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Program as more storage for the basin flows. That's what Indian River Lagoon South is designed to do. So just want to give some perspective on that. The lake inflows peaked at about 38,000 CFS and have reduced to 14,000 CFS, coming mostly from the Kissimmee. That is an amazing amount of water. We rarely see it that high. I can't remember in a long time ever seeing numbers like that. Usually we think 9,000 is a lot coming in from the Kissimmee. And so this is a really remarkable event. The district is maximizing flows through the East Coast canals, to the Lake Worth Lagoon, and to Biscayne Bay, and to all these other places that are also getting too much water. There's really no capacity. Everything is full up. There's no capacity in the canals south of Lake Okeechobee to move water to the stormwater treatment areas. And even if you could get it there, the stormwater treatment areas are completely full and have no capacity to actually treat the water to the standards that they have to meet for the Everglades. The water conservation areas are significantly high, way above their regulation schedules right now. I mean, Tree Island's flooding, the whole 9 yards. And then, so given all of this, what we are facing in the St. Lucie is the potential for a prolonged period of Lake Okeechobee freshwater releases to the estuaries, including the St. Lucie. This could be when we've seen this kind of situation in the past, and it all depends on when the lake peaks. But where we are right now, it could easily take 2 to 3 months of discharges expected at a pretty decent rate to try to move the needle on getting the lake level down. The Corps really is always planning for the next wet season. And so they have to make these decisions operationally about how they get themselves poised to get through the dry season and then the next wet season. They can't start too high or else they don't have the ability to move the water. Lake Okeechobee water quality. This is turbidity units and NTUs, and what I just really want to point out quickly here is that the white ones are on the lower end. Those are pretty good NTUs. When we see NTUs about over 25, 30, that starts to get of concern. That's some pretty dirty water. And these yellow or greenish yellow dots here, that is 50 to 116 NTUs. So and then these red ones are 116 to 169. So you had this slosh effect on the lake as the hurricane moved past. It pushed all the water over to this shore, and then it sloshed back, and it kind of stirred everything up on this side. Total phosphorus in the lake right now, you can again see these red dots are the real hot spots for phosphorus at 287 to 368 parts per billion. In the white, the white ones are the lowest, and that's 112 to 164. To give some perspective on this, the in-lake target for phosphorus concentration for the middle of the lake is 40. Right. And these numbers are 373, 352, 243, 388. I mean, the best we could hope for is 112. And so I want to give some perspective on just how far away we are and what this means to the downstream systems. This is what the SAD structure looks like looking downstream soon after Hurricane Irma passed. So you can see those releases ramping up. The water looks extremely dark, does not look natural whatsoever. This is a really dramatic photo because the releases coming from the North Fork are kind of coming here. So you have this dirty water, but then you have this other kind of dirty water on top of the dirty water. It's like looking at, if you can envision, pouring yourself a Dr. Pepper and then putting a Yoo-hoo on top of it and watching that sort of interact with each other. That's what this reminds me of. I've never done that, by the way, but I don't think I ever will. But the other thing that always strikes me about this particular photo is it's important to remember this is the compliance point for us to meet the St. Lucie TMDL. And the TMDL for St. Lucie assumes that Lake Okeechobee is meeting its water quality targets of 40. So there's something wrong with that reasoning that we'll have to continue to work with agencies and amongst ourselves to fix some of those sort of flawed assumptions. But this is the situation that we're dealing with. This is the St. Lucie Inlet. What's interesting is when we see these high volume releases, there is a tendency for it to go south. It depends on the tides too. We have had this plume also go north. We've also had it about 4 miles offshore from the St. Lucie Inlet. But this is basically kind of a high tide situation of what you're seeing right here, what it looks like. Salinity conditions in the estuary are absolutely fresh. We got a little bit, and like last week, we got a little bit of salinity in the 5 to 18 range right at the mouth of the inlet from the king tides and from that storm event that was pushing all the water in. So we did get a little bit of saltier conditions, but All of this area in the estuary, it's completely fresh. It is zero. And that's what you see here. This is the range that in the green range here is where we like to manage for oysters, and you can see we're very much in the poor zone. We have been for a period of time, so the more duration that you have of these really poor freshwater conditions, the oysters sort of clamp up and kind of try to wait it out, but typically we would expect mortality at this point in time for the duration of the event that we have so far, and it's expected to go on. And so I mentioned the fresh water in the estuary. The temperatures in the St. Lucie are ranging from about 82 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know for sure, but that might be saving us from the blue-green algae blooms that we saw from last year. If this were happening in July and the water temperatures were above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, we might be dealing with a very different situation here. So I guess if there is any silver lining, it's that there are no signs yet of cyanobacteria blooms. I would not say that we are out of the woods yet, because when we've seen in the past these long-duration Lake Okeechobee discharge events, they can be associated with some of the blooms that we see. So we're keeping our eyes out for it. And then just down here is a little snapshot of the most recent data for Roosevelt Bridge, Sandspit Park, Layton Park, and Stewart Sandbar. You can see the Enterococcus levels are very much in the poor range. At Sandspit Park, that's really close to the inlet, so you're getting some pretty good flushing there, and that kind of is characteristic of the amount of water that's coming from these discharges. You could even see at the Stewart Sandbar there were high levels. Enterococcus can come from faulty septic tanks, but it can also come from runoff of cattle pasture lands. It can come. It could be all kinds of things. It can be pet waste in yards. So it's very hard to determine the source, but we know that these numbers typically go up when we have high water events and a lot of discharges from Lake Okeechobee, which often correspond at the same time. So it's hard to tease out if there's any one cause for that or not. And we are posting our water conditions updates. As you can imagine, this is a topic of concern and discussion in our community. So we are posting those on our website. On the main screen, you'll see water conditions, and you can always go to see whatever latest updates we have, or you can always call us directly if there's anything we can help with. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I went fishing the midweek in Stewart, and I was off on Push Button Hill, and the dark brown water was all the way to Push Button Hill, and I didn't see where I started fishing. I usually go 200 feet of water, and I had to go to 550 feet of water, which is 14, 15 miles offshore. Double the distance. I mean, the plume coming off the peninsula of Florida from all this rain is phenomenal. It's the biggest in my lifetime. You know, we just had one of the biggest events of our lifetime. Hopefully we'll never see the likes of that again. Any questions for Deb?
No question, just a comment. That's an outstanding presentation, so factual and explained in ways that I think I can understand most of it.
Good, well, good.
So
that's the idea. Yeah, that's.
You did a super good job. What I want us to be impressed with, whatever I can do, I want this to carry over. So the lake was receiving about 300,000 gallons a second. So all of these folks that are thinking about how we're going to solve problems, the lake was receiving about 300,000 gallons. It slowed down to about 130,000 gallons a second. Just so we'll have a grasp of what's happening. And so if we had gotten Harvey instead of Irma, it probably would have flooded everybody down to Boca, at least. So it would have been at least. So what we need to be more, here's where I'm driving. We are currently involved in a process with Army Corps to try to evaluate what to do as far as the basins north of the lake and those basins south, east, and west of the lake. We have somewhat come to resolution north of the lake, in my view, totally insufficiently. We're looking at maybe a total of 450,000 acre feet of detention, retention, conservation, whatever. But that's not reservoir. A lot of that is aquifer storage and recovery, and some of that, I think they've taken the deep well injections off, but so it's not aquifer storage and recovery, in my view, and I'm not saying what your guys' view are, or Ms. Drum. In my view, that's a good system for a drought. When we're in drought, that's a good technology because then we can bring water back out. It's not a good technology when we're under emergency, as we are with in my view, when we are with a storm, because it will not accept water quickly enough to give relief. Once that water goes into the lake, there are only 2 outlets that are really exercised because we are the only ones that have sufficient capacity, and that's the 2 estuaries. Everybody else is probably already pumping whatever they can because south of the lake's probably already got the same rain that the rest of us have, so there's nowhere to go. I think we're planning a few $1 billion that will be totally insufficient, will not accomplish mission. That's my political pitch for this moment, and I didn't mean to detract from Ms. Drum. Ms. Drum did an outstanding job, and her presentation was extremely informative. I'd like for you to be aware and absorb her information. Thank you very much, Chair.
Debbie, thank you. Appreciate your report. It was
My pleasure.
excellent. On to 6B, Indian River Flushing Feasibility Study Report. Pete?
Yeah, hi, I'm Peter Succi, St. John's River Water Management District, and the district really thanks you for being able to take this time here today to hear our update. I see they have this set up for left-handers, probably somebody's revenge, but you know, you can host that. But anyway, what I'm going to talk to you about is a contract that we just finished with CDM Smith and Taylor Engineering. So it's really the bulk of their engineering work. And it was to essentially conceptually cost out a pilot flushing study. However, 2 to 3 years ago, we had already worked with them on also a screening analysis of where locations might be for a project to move ocean water into the Indian River Lagoon. So there's a little bit of background that I'll also talk about. So starting with the background, about 3 years ago, CDM Smith went through the areas of the lagoon. Now this picture happens to be a picture of seagrass and seagrass loss. Not important that you see the details of it, but just that it was one factor in understanding where, in sort of ranking where a project might be beneficial. So the idea being that there had been considerable loss of seagrass due to phytoplankton blooms. We were focused on the areas where the blooms and the seagrass losses primarily occurred. As an example, at this time, when we did this work, Mosquito Lagoon really did not have as much seagrass loss as Banana River. So one of the criteria was to look at that, you know, locations where there was appreciable seagrass loss. And that's also the reason why we didn't examine the southern lagoon as thoroughly. Also, we looked at flushing and how restricted it was. And the real reason for that is because a restricted area would respond most readily to bringing in a volume of ocean water than an open area would. So that automatically means that a smaller, less costly project would have greater effect in a restricted area. And so that's basically a cost-benefit analysis almost, right there. So then we did a site location ranking. And so really what we're looking for is just open land that's primarily owned by, is public land where you could actually site a project. And then there's some factors here. For example, the northern Indian River Lagoon is west of Merritt Island, so it's impossible to directly bring water into that area. Some of the areas to the south, of course, as I mentioned, are already fairly highly flushed by inlets. And Cape Canaveral also is another area where you really can't bring water across, just even if you're allowed to by NASA. But by virtue of having the Cape there, it also essentially, it's too large a distance to traverse. So really we were, in the end, cited most of our suggestions were to move to southern Banana River. Now, I should say, when I put that up there, though, that although we identified these locations, we did not get any indication from any of those entities whether or not they would accept or even cooperate with a project. And that's going to come up again here, where you actually could do it and what landowners would actually be willing to have it done. We got good conversations with Port Canaveral. The National Seashore was willing to engage us, but again, we didn't spend a lot of time looking at Mosquito Lagoon. Whereas, Kennedy Space Center and the Patrick Air Force Base, essentially were non-responsive. They didn't let us on their property. So in the end, and now we're going to move to the idea of the flushing project. So the concept here was that FIT actually proposed, I would say, were the first ones to propose the idea of a flushing project, because this was considered a controversial project. I think even to, there's a lot of good arguments that were presented on that side of saying why you shouldn't do it. But a lot of it also came down to the idea of unintended consequences. And to some extent, engineering hubris really kind of came up. So FIT suggested, well, let's do an experiment, do a pilot project. And they had recommended also this area of Port Canaveral. It's an obvious place because it's the single place where ocean water is the closest to the lagoon, and so that would make the cost less. But FIT did not provide any cost or method for moving the water from the port into the lagoon. So the district took that part on. So those two little red boxes on there are the two places where we identified as being reasonably close passages. Again, the property, we weren't able to actually get any commitment that we could put a project to these locations, but we use these to represent this type of a project and do the cost estimates, and also look at the methodology. So we looked at both culverts and we looked at pumps. For the culvert design, the constraint here was that that the culvert would be driven by the tides, but the tides aren't really large, so this is really a fairly low head situation. And so, in order, you needed to keep basically the pipes fairly short, and to do that, I think CDM Smith came up with a great idea to put essentially a drop structure. So what you see on this picture, on the left side of that picture, we're crossing the roads, underneath the road, and then there's this big, essentially, box structure with a weir, so the water would flow into that and then overflow a weir. That would prevent scour, allow it to be in a fairly shallow area, reduce the length of the pipe, and thus the cost of the whole project. The problem with this, though, is that although there's mostly one-way flow into the lagoon, Port Canaveral really didn't want any flow back, any backflow. This does allow for some backflow. So it could be a problem. These culverts, by the way, are fairly large, too, 6 feet. Now, we had done some modeling. This is the Water Management District's work. And the idea, we identified about 100 to 200 CFS as something what we thought was required for a type of a pilot project. And that really comes to, you can imagine that if you put in a very small project, put in a garden hose, you're not going to see it, right? On the other hand, you don't necessarily want to, pop an inlet as a pilot project, which would be this huge thing. So somewhere in between. So we did some hydrodynamic modeling and thought that, and established that about 100 to 200 CFS of flow would be something that at least would be a measurable effect and something that you could look at for an experiment. To do that with the 6-foot culverts would require 15. So it's getting to be a fairly large project, and that, again, was one of the reasons why when I get to the expenses of the culvert, you'll see that. Now, before we get to the cost, though, we'll jump now to the pump design. On the right is the Destin Harbor pump station, which is often cited as a successful pumping project. And the reason we put that picture in there is really just to show you that, if you put a pump in, you're going to need to have some infrastructure on the ground to house it. You're going to have maintenance people there. They need access, So there is some land requirement for the pump. But, so CDM Smith and Taylor laid out the conceptual layout. They looked at electrical versus diesel. And the flow rate for pumps was fairly easy. A single pump can do 100 CFS. 2 pumps could do 200. So now, this is a location where they used to lay out the pump and the pump design for the cost estimate. This is Port Canaveral property, and we now know that this would not be available, but Bob Musser is going to come up after me and talk about that, so I don't think I really need to talk about that anymore. The idea of the pump is simply to have large boxes with screens inside the port, and that's to prevent entrainment of larvae and so on. And then on the other side, you need to have some stilling devices so the water doesn't go in it with too great a velocity. But you do need to have, some infrastructure on the ground. So you need to have a little bit of property. And right now, we don't know where that would necessarily be. Oh, that's interesting. The cost estimates now. So the way it worked is that the culverts have a large upfront cost. And in addition to that, if you were doing a pilot project, you have to decommission it when you decide to end it. After 1 year or 2 years, if you're going to walk away, to decommission the culverts was fairly pricey. And that's the reason why on that plot, so what we provided was, in that box up there, the costs, a 1-year cost for a pilot project, but then also a 20-year cost if you actually did an actual project, because then the culverts start to look better because they have less maintenance. But essentially the reason that the 20-year project cost for a culvert is less than the 1 year is because the 1 year includes the decommissioning, which is large for the culverts, but the 20-year wouldn't. You would just leave it in place. For the pump for 1 year, it has less initial cost, but there's a lot more maintenance. Essentially, you need to have an operator, for example. You need to have people clean the screens on a regular basis. So a lot of maintenance for the pump, but for a 1 year or 2 year pilot project, the pump would be much more cost effective. Over the long term, it's possible that the culverts would be better. And since then, since again, this was a conceptual project, we've gotten some feedback about a multiple system, have a combination of pumps and culverts. So, that's just something that we didn't deal with. But I think what we're trying to do here is give you some sense of what type of money you would need to establish this. So the pros and cons, I really talked a lot about these already, but the bottom line is that the pump's easy to achieve the high flow needed. Also, the pumps have the advantage if for example, there was a spill, a contaminant inside the port, and you needed to close that off so that it wouldn't get into the lagoon, the pumps could be closed down quickly. You would have an operator there to be able to do that. The culverts, you wouldn't be able to do that. But depending on where you were, over a long period of time, it's possible that culverts for an actual project would be more cost benefit. So to get to what the district needs. So the district has currently budgeted $86,000 to look at a data collection for a baseline in this area. So we have a contract set up, we have our contractor. If this board agrees to pursue this as your project, not our project, as funding, legislative funding of some kind, we would go ahead and initiate that contract this year. If not, we feel like we wouldn't be any reason to go collect data that would not be worthwhile to collect. So that's sort of the action request from the Water Management District. Our staff is available to answer questions. We of course have reports. We have longer presentations, one we gave on Tuesday. So we'd be happy to assist in any way we can. But at this point, we're kind of trying to pass this off as your project. And it's been interesting for me to be involved with a controversial project, because as an engineer, that doesn't happen very often. Engineers are not boring people, but we just are very interested in boring things most of the time. And so here we are. Anyway, I thank you for your attention. And do you have any questions of me now, or you're going to defer discussion until after Bob?
Anybody have any questions? No?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I'm a big advocate of having more tools for the lagoon. There used to be inlets naturally. I've studied this in grad school. I had a grad school for years, and there were inlets all up and down the whole length of the Inner Lagoon complex naturally that they'd blow out as the lagoon would fill up. The water would seek low spots on the barrier island, blow out for months and months and months. We've blocked that flushing with the roads and condos and the Cape. It's no longer able to cleanse itself. And people are moving here in my neck of the woods in Indian River County. I played golf the other day, and there's 500 homes being built there, and in Tradition, 4,600 homes being built in Tradition. I mean, people are marching to Florida, more rooftops, more malls, more streets. I would love to think that this lagoon can heal itself if we give it all the tools we can, and we're trying, but I think it needs with flushing that it used to get naturally, that is blocked. And I think it's a tool in the toolbox, and where it is and how it is, I don't know how we do that, but I think it's an important concept that we need to keep in play. I think it's important for the health of this region. Inlets work. After Hurricane Sandy blew out new inlets on the upper east coast of the United States, and their lagoon complex came to life again. And there's all sorts of data on what Sandy did in cutting large inlets up there, and the flushing and what it created in the way of health to the animals of their lagoon complex. So like dispersed water storage and other important tools in the toolbox for water management, this, I think, is an important tool to the health of the lagoon, and I'd like to keep this in play, and I urge the council to support that we keep this in play.
Mr. Chair, you do have a request for a statement from Bob Musser from Port Canaveral.
I was going to ask, once I get done with their comments, I was going to go to the public.
And then I would like to jump in as well to just give you a staff perspective on this once we get your direction.
Okay.
I agree with you. I think it should stay on the table, but I also think that there's a lot of questions that maybe us folks up here wouldn't even know how to ask. So I think it's very complex. I think it would be really good for the STEM committee to look at this.
Yep.
And another question that I do have is I really think that a one-year pilot project is too short to get information that's useful on this.
I agree. Any other comments from the board? No? With that, I'd like to go to our speaker card, and you're back up again. Come on back on up, Bob.
Thank you. Bob Musser, I'm the Environmental Director at the Port Authority. I'm also the Port's Management Board representative for the council. We met with the Water Management District, Pete, I think it was what back in November of 16, I think we had an initial meeting. They came in, and while we are supportive of their district's efforts, we did present a number of concerns, mostly from infrastructure and an engineering standpoint, one of which Pete mentioned. In the unlikely event there is a spill or release in the port, I think the last thing we would want to have is that material getting over into the Banana River and the Indian River Lagoon system. The one designed with the culverts really currently has no way to stop that flow through. The pumping system would, but there's a time lag in there. Not that we often have those, but there's always the potential. We do have very good water quality within the harbor. The last thing that I'd want to have is if there is something significant there. But I did want to mention on the infrastructure piece as well, the location that was selected is, for one, it's the artery into the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. It's State Road 401 that goes around the port. It is also the artery for our fuel terminal. Directly after Hurricane Irma, when the port was reopened, within 48 hours, we had about 800 fuel trucks that went out on that road. So putting those culverts underneath State Road 401 brings up some significant engineering challenges that, if it would go forward, that need to be looked at very closely, that does not impact that artery. We were getting trucks out as quickly as we could to fuel the folks returning to Florida that had evacuated. The other thing I think that Pete mentioned as well, where the pumping station is, and we mentioned this when we met with them, we have a new cargo berth that's going to be constructed there. Originally, that was a few years off, but because of the commercial space program, that is happening quicker now than we anticipated. And just at our last commission meeting, that project is now moving forward. So in addition to, I think, the science of this, it needs to be more of an engineering look. Our concern is, sedimentation. Are the hydrodynamics of the port going to change? Is it going to cause us to have to do more dredging projects with the Army Corps? There are potentially other locations, such as along the locks, and we provided contact information for the district to reach out to them. Again, we are supportive of it, but the recommendation from the management board was to have, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dwayne, but have this go back to the STEM to look at it more closely on the scientific side. But in addition, I think it needs to have the engineering overlook as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere.
We really appreciate the dedicated participation of the port in the management group, and even beyond that, in helping us establish some grant funds and things. And I want you to know we very much appreciate that, for what y'all have done.
Thank you.
This raises an area of question I'm not totally familiar with, but I think extremely good questions. But I think there are other areas of questions that would arise as well, and we would be changing the dynamics of the water, and what effect would that, or what effects would that have on species? I mean, there may be species that wouldn't tolerate various increases in, say, salinity over a period of time. Maybe they have a short-term toleration, but if you do it continually, maybe they don't tolerate it. I don't know, but I think those would be some of the kinds of questions that our STEM folks would be more aware of and more able to look into. I think something of this sort needs to have a deeper view before we start even thinking about money. We're not in the money game right now. We're in the game of there's a concept. Let's see how valid the concept might be as we look at the various aspects. And it's extremely complex. And so it would go from the aspects of the engineering aspects and just those technical things about where and when and then how much would that be, to what would the effects be on other elements of the lagoon body itself, the species, the residents of the lagoon. What effects would that be? I don't know. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Any other comments from you?
I got a question.
Okay.
Thanks for coming, because you're the first person I wanted to hear from when this was presented. And I'm with you, Doug, that I've been in the briefings with Florida Institute of Technology. I know, Bob, you were there as well, just to look at the potential benefits of this that needs to look at. And the most appealing thing is it's trying to recreate what was naturally here in the Banana River. But it has to work in cooperation with the port. It can't work, at counter to where the port is, or if it's located anywhere, it has to work with wherever it's located. And so I don't know, Bob, whether you have, I absolutely understand your concerns and the engineering concerns of it. Do you have any in-house engineering resources that can help, with, as it goes to the STEM and as it gets thought about further to help with maybe better ways to do it?
We do have some engineers on staff, but I think we'd have to probably reach out to some of our continuing contract consultants that we have for additional assistance with this. From the initial meeting that we had with the district, and they had the CM Smith and I think Taylor Engineering were the two firms that were doing the study. We wish they would have kind of come back with us during the process. We received this report, I think, the week before Hurricane Irma came through, so we didn't have much time to review it. But that said, we did raise some of these same concerns when we met with them. And if I could just make one quick comment, we did take when district staff was out there, we did take them out to the locks, and they got to see a lock-through event and really see there's not a whole lot of flow that goes on with the tidal conditions out there, depending what the tide is when the locks open. And I think that opened up a lot of eyes about whether or not that's a viable solution, and that's what drove them to look at the pumping and the culvert solution as well. Like I said, we're supportive of the efforts, and I agree with the chair that this could potentially be a tool in the toolbox for lagoon restoration, but it does need more vetting.
Clearly. Yeah. Okay. Well, just want to make sure you're at the table, because it seems, as we were talking about it earlier, it always seems to come back to that area. And that's very critical to your operation. So just, do you have resources on the STEM support?
We're looking for some guidance from council, but from a procedural standpoint, the logical next step would be to bring this to the STEM AC for a technical review. But there are other considerations that I think really maybe you should think about directing us as staff to do. And there's a couple big ones. Number one, this project is simply way bigger and way more complicated than the NEP staff can handle. This is an engineering construction project. And while if we get to that go, no-go point for fundraising for it, we're adequate to do that. But I and my staff are not capable, experienced, or competent enough to oversee a project of this scale. So we'd be looking for an entity to say, we want to be the prime overseer on the management of this contract because of its complexity. And then Kathy LaMartina's comment is exactly what I'm hearing from a number of the scientists that I've talked to, even before we saw the report, that to do the science correctly for a pilot study like this, think a minimum of 3 years. And so and I want to go on the record, I'm really happy the Water Management District took this on. This has been a discussion even before I came on as an executive director, all the way back to 2011. Flushing kept coming up, and we never had the basic position to start having a reasonable discussion about what that meant. And so thanks to the governing board and Ann Chortel and the district, they have given us this vision, a concept of what it might look like with some construction costs. But if you look at this document, it does not include full design and engineering. It does not include that recurring year of science. And so those numbers are kind of pre-planning numbers. They're good targets, but it's 3 to 5 million based on this. So my recommendation as staff is, let us bring it back to the STEM AC and direct myself and staff to kind of start talking to the potential partners, including going back to the district, to kind of see where this project best lands. We need to talk to Brevard County if it's in Brevard and our other partners. It's complicated at all levels: construction, science, and partnership.
And also, if I can mention, what permitting this project is going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be extremely difficult. I've
Yeah,
done
that's true.
And probably lengthy process. Probably even with everybody at the table, it's going to take a while to get through that.
Mr. Chair, one other point on this. Thanks to Bob and the port, they have invited me in over the last several months into the discussions with Florida DOT, who are planning a 6-lane expansion of 528 Causeway going into the port. That is one of those 50-year kind of projects, and we have been suggesting at every meeting, including one coming up on Monday, that DOT take a look at maybe decreasing the size of the causeway and increasing a span bridge, which could have some impacts to the whole Flushing baseline concept. And so this project that we're seeing today, may be modified to some degree if in fact DOT decides to, cut back on some of those causeways. So that's another moving part that I wanted to at least let you know that we're talking about it, but we're not sure where we're going.
Yes, sir.
Interesting, and not what we're on, but I'll encourage DOT. DOT is a major contributor to the contaminants that go into the lagoon as they come off of the roads. So that's not saying something bad. That's just an observation. That's how it is. So they're a major contributor. So if they're planning a 6-lane, we want them concurrently to plan to take care of all of that contribution that is going to be intensified and coming off of that potential road. Or I do anyhow. I want that to be addressed. Here on what we're talking about now, it would seem to me this is a new, it's more precise rendition of a concept that in general has been talked about. I think that we have focused to the point of saying, yes, this is a good idea for let's let STEM become more involved in looking at, analyzing, and give us feedback on. But in saying that, I too think that we as the council and the underlying formation of the council, the intent was to pull together the counties and the agencies and focus on water quality as it was affected by various activities that we were more familiar with and were faced with. And that was septic sewer, that was stormwater runoff, and that's the overt spillage from wastewater plants, which really galls me, candidly. It just terribly galls me that here we concentrate all of this stuff into wastewater plants, and we can't take a quarter inch of rain because then it, well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it really, I'm just trying to say it galls me deeply that we then do that and we run it into the lagoon. So there are areas, there are activities that we are currently engaged in that we're trying to moderate because we know these are creating problems, and that's where we're helping with projects and giving money and grants and encouraging people. This activity is one that I think the thing that we could do that would be the most useful is for the group of scientists that have come together, John Windsor and Chuck and Deb and all of these other folks that have come together and match them with the PEs so that we can get a better grasp of the complexities of this, and then we can get a better grasp of the potential impacts. So my motion would be, subject to additional council discussion, is that we ask that this be brought back to the STEM committee for their involvement and for their participation and review, and that they would timely, in some timely fashion, would come back with some kind of report to council. That would be the motion, please. So is there a second?
Do we have a second? Second? Dwayne, any discussion? We have a motion and a second on the motion. Does the staff want to comment on that?
We have a STEM AC meeting next month, and so we will put this on the agenda as one of 2 items for that meeting. And we'll notice that out, so you all, if you want to participate, know that date and the discussion.
All right. Well, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Is that all you want to comment on that issue, Dwayne? Anything you want to do with the Flushing feasibility?
No, we're good.
You're good? All right, let's move on to 7A, consent agenda, approval of the August 11th, 2017 meeting minutes.
I believe we approve consent with the approval of the agenda itself.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. That passes. 7B, contract renewal, communications and branding support.
I believe we moved that to 9.
Yeah, that was moved
That's
to
right.
new business.
Okay. We move on to number 8, old business. Dwayne, you want to, or Kathy Hill?
It's me. So in your board package, we have given you the meeting minutes that we're going to notice for quarterly meetings next year. So we'll do a January meeting, an April meeting, July and October. We also have 2 questions for you. Because we're going to a quarterly schedule, that opened up a lot of Fridays and provides the opportunity to schedule some science summits and workshops and things of that nature. So questions for you to get back to us at some point. It doesn't have to be today, but please let us know what kinds of things you'd like to hear about in a science summit or some kind of workshop. So we can start gathering the resources for that and the speakers for that. There are 3 dates that I've given you for those. So we're going to do one in March, one in June, and one in November. So that's the first question. The second question is there is an opportunity for you all and our entire management conference to participate in Harbor Branch's IRL Symposium. So this would be on the Friday, the public day. They've asked us not to do a meeting that day, but if you want to do some kind of a panel discussion or some kind of informational thing, but there's an opportunity for all of you to participate on that day as well. So if you can give us some guidance on that. That's going to be in February 16th.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
A couple of things, please. February 16th?
Yes.
I think it's extremely useful for us to have that kind of interaction with IRL, And so if that's a panel discussion, then that's good, but whatever. I believe that's a very useful opportunity for us to have that interaction. Second, I'm wondering on the management board, are we able to, what dates, what day of the week are we on the management board?
Management board stated Tuesday. They voted to keep the Tuesday. The only other day available for them that worked for everybody was Monday, and they decided they didn't want to do Monday meetings, so they're going to remain on Tuesdays.
I heard you. I'd like for us to start encouraging people to, let's start looking at Mondays. I would like to go. I can't go because we have board meetings on Tuesdays. I just can't go. And that's how it is. So, but I would like to go. I think that'd be useful. But move that, are we ready for a motion?
Yes, sir.
Move that we accept the staff recommendation for the calendar.
Do we have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Yeah, so I have some questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So you had asked us for guidance, and I'm not sure what guidance you were looking for, whether there'd be a coupling. So you got the panel, that not a council. What was the other question?
To do the science summits and the workshops, we're just looking for some topic ideas of things that you would like more information on. To give you the opportunity to participate as well. So, the STEM committee has some ideas about what a good science summit, seagrass growth and things of that nature. So this is your opportunity. If you have things you want to hear about, just send me an email and we'll get that working.
So, and the other question, the all-hands meeting in December, does that involve the council board or?
Yes, we're anticipating just a little bit of business at that meeting, and then most of it, we're going to roll out the calendar and the annual report and the website, and just kind of have a sort of end of the year look back at what we've done this year. And
so is that another meeting?
That will be another meeting, yeah.
So December and January?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I got it. All right.
Well then.
Thanks.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign.
Great.
Kathy, anything else?
And maybe ask, would you again say the proposed meeting dates, please? Oh, okay.
They're in your board package, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
All right, on to 8B. Dwayne, we have the CCMP revision.
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief on this. You have in your package the proposed draft of a table of contents for the revision. We're revising the 2008 CCMP in its entirety. Thanks to you and many others. We've had a lot of input from our teams. And I'll just go up here just to run through the process that we're envisioning. I have talked to the other NEPs that have done full revisions, and they have all told me it's going to take 2.5 years to do this from start to finish. We're going to see if we can't break that record by landslide, because it's my intent to try to get a draft out in this fiscal year to give us enough time to move forward with relatively long time for public comment. We're thinking 90 days. And so we have to follow EPA guidelines on this. I will be working directly with Jennifer at Region 4 every step of that way. Contract support is underway. So one of the things I want to ask those of you, actually all of you, Tetra Tech is already beginning to assemble a project list. And it began with our feasibility study for stormwater, which was 9 projects. We have Martin County's surface water plan, which provided projects, but by all means, do not hesitate to give them any and all projects that relate to water quality or habitat in the lagoon, whether it's on a 5-year CIP, 10-year CIP. We're not looking for shovel-ready turn dirt. We're looking for that, that list of projects that each of you have within your own organizations in that future view out. And we will begin to bring this from the bottom up and the top down, but having that list is really, really important to us in the short term. So that's already underway. Revision draft will be driven by me from the office and then reviewed through our management conference. To do this any other way is going to take 2.5 years. And so I have already talked to the management board. I will talk to STEM AC. I will reach out in those areas where we need technical support, but we were going to drive this one from inside out at the office. We know where we need to go. I've looked at all 27 other CCMPs. There's a lot of stuff I like. There's a lot of stuff I think we can do better. But the long story short on this is that I'm hoping that by June, you are looking at least a 90% draft of what this would look like, with the idea that we're going to spend, I think, considerable time in certain topics where we're going to have to engage all 45 cities, the counties, the state, our federal partners to make sure that 3 things happen: science-driven, clear, actionable objectives, that if I am Oak Hill, or Fellsmere, that I can look at this document and without having to read 200 pages, kind of see where my role and responsibilities are. And lastly, that we have it in the versions we need. So I'm anticipating a comprehensive conservation management plan that meets EPA objectives. And what we've seen from some of our partners is there may be a second iteration for the counties and the cities that kind of scrubs out all the noise, maybe just looks at projects, and then an executive summary for public to kind of get a sense of, we don't want to be in the weeds, but tell us what you're going to do. So my goal by the end of this year, a year from now, that we are in full public review on a draft document. And wish me luck on that one. I'm a little nervous. No action necessary, but if you have comments, please distribute that table of contents far and wide to your staff. Now's a good time to make sure we haven't left anything out, and we'll be working closely with your staffs at all levels to make sure you're fully engaged at every level of this.
Dwayne, you might as well stay right there with new business.
Okay, first item of new business is the EPA report to you on our 5-year program evaluation. Jennifer DeMeo is here from Region 4 to walk you through that, but I do want to go on record that while I was scared to death as your new director looking at a 5-year program evaluation that looked back 4 years where I wasn't here, working with the EPA was not only productive, forward-thinking, but the process was extremely useful to me and my staff to better position us not only to comply with EPA and Clean Water Act rules, but to get us into a more actionable, what I would call accountable position. And so while I heard a lot of, Dwayne, you're not going to believe how hard this PE process was, and it is long and it's arduous. It's a full program audit. We are a better program for it. So I just want to thank in advance all of the folks at the EPA, Holly Greening, who supported the whole effort on the team. This was a learning experience that provided high value to us. So I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
So I would prefer to stand where I can address the board as well as our audience members, including the management conference and public. But Kathy, do I need to be up there to move my slides?
You're good right there.
Am I okay? Okay. Sorry, as EPA, we always address everyone in the room, so that's what I'm used to. Good morning. I'm Jennifer DeMeo with the United States Environmental Protection Agency out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I have the pleasure to go over EPA's program evaluation for 2017 for the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. So we can actually take out preliminary now because the program evaluation letter was signed late yesterday. So I believe, do they have a copy of the letter that Vince faxed over?
Yes, it's in your package.
Okay, great. So y'all feel free to skim through that. You can see it's a relatively brief document. It's 4 pages, and I will go over kind of the reason why we chose to do it that way. So next slide, please. So before we kind of delve in, I thought it would be beneficial to go over the background and to provide some context for the performance. Why do I keep saying performance? For the program evaluation. Specifically, why is the EPA evaluating the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program? Well, as you know, the Indian River Lagoon is designated as an estuary of national significance under the Clean Water Act. So as such, it has a set of regulations and requirements that the IRL NEP must comply with in order to be under this designation, as well as to receive federal funding. So the PE is one of the ways that EPA assesses the NEP program to ensure compliance. Many other ways that we do this is through annual reports, mid-year reports, our work plan agreements, cooperative agreements, things like that. So the PE is just one of the ways. It's done every 5 years. Now, it was done every 2 years, then 3 years, and now it's 5 years, which is, I think, a movement in the right direction. The IRL NEP is part of Group A, and there's 6 other NEPs that are in Group A. So they're going through the PE process during the same time that IRL NEP is. It's the only NEP in Region 4 that's going through the PE process right now. I guess it's almost over. I guess this is going to be kind of the closing bell. There is a NEP PE guidance document that's written that provides, some guidance to the NEPs on the material that we want for them to report on. As you can imagine, it's sometimes very difficult to link NEP activities to the overall environmental outcome. That takes time. So what we do is we list out some of these core elements, such as financials, program planning, administration, outreach, public involvement, assessment, monitoring, reporting. So essentially, the IRL NEP staff is given the task of telling not only me, but Washington, D.C., everything about the NEP program that you guys hold so near and dear to your heart. That is huge. That is a huge undertaking. Mm-hmm. So in headquarters, we have Vince Bacalon. He is relatively new to the NEP program. I'm no veteran to it. And the ability of the NEP program to address everything that EPA asked, it was a seamless way for us to connect the dots. And so Holly Greening, as Dwayne mentioned, was our ex officio director, and so she accompanied us on the site visit and stuff. And she is not new to the NEP process. She is an expert. I think if you could call an expert to the NEP, I think people would say Holly Greening. She said that this program evaluation package was not only the best she's ever seen, but should also be a national example. So I think that's not only, is it coming from us, it's coming from within and an expert in the NEP. So just huge bravo to this staff. It was amazing. Okay, I'll step off my little soapbox there, because that could have been very, very, very difficult for us to connect the dots, and they made it very, very seamless. So the PE team is essentially, it's representative from headquarters, myself, and then Holly Greening. We cannot thank her enough for joining us on this journey. Again, the PE findings are delivered to Dwayne via letter, which he received last night. And the next PE, Dwayne, is 2022. So you have 5 years to address the recommendations that EPA is mentioning in this letter. So, okay, next slide, please. And you passed. So, although pass does not appear to be that grand of a term.
It's pass-fail.
I know, it is. It's like the thresholds that we use are pass, conditionally pass, or fail. So pass is the highest you can get. So congratulations on that. And so, but what this means is that the IRL NEP is certified, if you will, to continue to be considered a national estuary. There's only 28 in the country. So you continue under that designation, and you continue to receive funding, federal funding, which you have received. And so for this year, $677,000, I believe, has been given to the IRL NEP
That's
program.
correct.
Do we get a pay raise for such a good, outstanding report?
That is up to you guys. I think so. All right, next slide, please. So basically what I'm going to do is go over some areas that the IRL NEP, some recommendations from the previous PE that the IRL NEP has addressed this year. So going to go over the progress made, some areas where the NEP is supporting some core Clean Water Act programs, and then the strengths and the challenges and recommendations that are mentioned in this year's PE. So if you go to the next slide, so the progress made since the 2012 PE, while all the recommendations that were mentioned in the previous program evaluation have been addressed, so that's huge, all of them. We decided to highlight the three major ones. So we have the expansion of the management conference, the increased financial resources, and the website and public accessibility to the documents. So in 2012, the PE recommendation was that the NEP should diversify and add several new members to its advisory board or their board of directors. Check. In the letter, we highlight how the management conference is now, representing diverse groups of citizens, communities, science, research organizations, and things like that. So that is a huge, as you'll see later, not only a way that the whole NEP has addressed the 2012 recommendation, but now we're actually considering that a strength of this NEP. So it's like a full 180. So you'll see that in just a minute. The increased financial resources, previously we wanted to see the NEP become more financially independent. Clearly that has happened. The website and accessibility, we had mentioned previously we wanted to see an independent website, its own website, not housed under anyone else, and to improve accessibility to documents. And we're already seeing that not only through the new website, but the interim website that these guys managed through the transition from the Water Management District to this new entity. So that's huge, as well as the social media presence that is happening to engage a larger audience. Okay. So we know that the NEP supports a plethora of Clean Water Act programs. The two that headquarters wants us to identify 2 or 3 of those, and the ones we decided were the Harbor Branch studies for the nitrogen and phosphorus research. We highlighted that to support the implementation of the basin management action plans, as well as the non-point source pollution, controlling that. And in our letter, we highlighted the Wilbur by the Sea project in Volusia County, as well as the wet season fertilizer bans. Next slide. Okay, so the PE strengths. So these are the areas that EPA has identified as strengths of the NEP program within the past 5 years. So out of the core element, program implementation and reporting, we wanted to highlight financial management. So again, not only is this an improvement since 2012, because that was an area of recommendation, but we're also highlighting it as a strength. So here, we're talking about the interlocal agreement, that financial commitment that was put into play, the IRL to the Canal Port Authority donations, the Harris Corporation in-kind assistance, and just overall the ability to leverage $89 million from the $3.6 million that was provided by EPA over the past 5 years. So, this really speaks the volumes when an organization is able to not only continue to utilize the existing sources, but to reach deeper and to come up with new creative ways and to partner with new organizations to increase your financial stability of an organization. So that was a huge strength of this NEP. Now, the second one, again, is the outreach and public involvement. Again, this is a 180, I feel like. This is clearly a high priority for this National Estuary Program, and it's one that is continuing to grow. So we talked about, how the connections have been strengthened over the past couple of years through the multiple presentations and meetings and news and articles and interviews and things that the NEP has done. And we would be remiss if we did not mention the NEP's response to the concerned community and citizens during the harmful algal blooms. So that we wanted to put on the record what a strength that is of this organization and what a great job that this NEP has done. And we are very excited about the small grants program, the introduction of the small grants program. This really, I saw during our site visit, this culture change that's happening because of these small localized projects that are affecting the community and how they're beginning to do things differently. During the PE site visit, which was amazing, some of the people in this room were able to join us, and I met so many champions of the Indian River Lagoon watershed. I met Captain Billy Rotney and his ability. He, every day up in Mosquito Lagoon, every day he is teaching young to old what we preach. And it was just such a joy to be on his boat and for him to show us the oyster reef restoration projects and talking to these fishermen, and afterwards us having a conversation with them and, so what is the National Estuary Program and what do you do, and having a fishing guide talking to his people about us and bringing them in. I mean, these local champions, this is what it's all about. I was so in awe when I met with Kelly McGee and she was talking about the project, H2O projects. Oh my gosh, and I joked half-heartedly that I wanted to go to that academy that they do. It was just, it was so amazing. The leadership that organization has, not only science, the science is there, but also that nonpartisan approach to have government and the environment and how it's together, it's not one or the other, is so necessary right now, and it was very refreshing, and I think we're very lucky to have her. A couple other champions that I definitely wanted to kind of give shout outs to was Brevard Zoo, Keith Winston, such a vision. I was looking through my notes as I was preparing for this, and my note said, this guy gets it. It was just like his vision that he had and what the NEP can do and how they can collaborate and bring people together. And then also just the genuine perspectives of the people that we have here, of who we hear from every day, like Deb Drum, her ability to take highly scientific, complex issues and to present them, almost so simply that it's like, of course that makes sense. And her words, being here for so long and just seeing the perspective change and knowing where the National Estuary Program is now, and the spot we're in was, it really just, it was really insightful to us at EP, because I'm in Atlanta, Vince is in DC, and we try to come down as often as we can. So we really appreciate those people taking the time out and to help inform us and engage us. Okay. The other thing I do want to mention about the small grants program that I'm really looking forward to, because I would like to see the NEP do more of this, is to reach out into smaller, economically challenged, underserved communities. And I know we discussed that, Susan, at our meeting on Friday before and for Indian River County. So I'm really excited to hear kind of that dialogue starting, or continuing. Not starting, but continuing. Okay, number 3, please. Okay, and then the other strength that we wanted to highlight was habitat. And this really does build on the outreach and public involvement, because it's the ability to pull from multiple funding sources in order to get these big projects done. There are 3 areas that I wanted to highlight that we saw: the Turtle Mound, Wesley's Island, and the Indian Hills and Veteran Memorial Park. Just the ability and the collaboration to bring all these different multiple sources together in order to get these big projects done, in order to restore everything that the National Estuary Program has been able to do, the 20,000 acres in the past 5 years. So we definitely have to mention what the rehab and the restoration that's occurred throughout this watershed. So now the challenges and recommendations. So our first one is the assessment and monitoring. And as we know, this is always a challenging. Any conference I've ever gone to has been like, we need more data, or we need to share our data. It's like kind of the ubiquitous challenge that we always hear. So this is really what we did want to highlight is that the STEM AC is providing that necessary coordination and communication that's needed in order to develop that coordinated monitoring plan that we all know is needed for the lagoon. This kind of hits on that data sharing issue that we all know. So it's a challenge only because we know how big of a task this is going to be, not only for the STEM AC, but how the STEM AC is going to be able to bring this to the whole conference. So you're on the right, it's like a challenge, but you're on the right track. Keep going. This is going to be huge. And we'd like to see the NEP take, a larger role in coordinating this. And that's what we see. We see the STEM AC really taking on this role, and we're really excited about that. So 2022, Dwayne. All right, the next challenge is the program planning and administration. Well, you guys have amazing staff. The IRL NEP staff is amazing. It's EPA's concern, though, for the longevity of the NEP program. We need to make sure that we have enough resources here to continue to produce, to keep this momentum up. And so our recommendation here is to some sort of a staffing analysis to ensure that adequate resources are here to continue to meet EPA's grant requirements and the goals of the CCMP. And I admire Dwayne for saying he's going to do that. I mean, I'm going to do it. We're going to do it in 8 months. If anybody else says it's going to be 2 years, but we want you with us after the CCMP is done.
I may be too old. I may be too old to make it to 2022.
So that is EPA. That is a genuine concern of EPA's. I mean, we do the NEP staff typically is 6 folks. You have 3. So, and they're amazing. And Frank's always going to say he loves his job, and there's never a bad day. But I know how many times I have to call Frank, Newport entries, Frank, due to cooperative agreement, Frank, Dunn's entry. I mean, it's just, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes to comply with EPA's requirements. But y'all you're killing it. You're killing it. Okay, next one, please. And then climate resiliency. Honestly, I believe that this is in every single NEP's PE. It's a challenge. It's what we all have to deal with, sea level rise. What is, again, so fortunate about your staff here is that they have applied for additional money to help with climate resiliency. So base fund is 600. They got an additional 77,000. So again, it's a challenge. However, they see it as a challenge. They're working on different ways to address the challenge. They've reserved dedicated funding. It's in their pot. So all of these challenges, if you see, are actually keep going. Like, this is great. Keep going. So next slide. And that's basically it. I put my information up there again. Anybody, please feel free to call me, contact me, email me at any time. That's my work phone number and my email. I'm always here. We try to get down as much as we can. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the council? Not seeing any. Jennifer, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Dwayne?
I'd be remiss not to make this statement. First, you can see Jennifer's, exceptional support of this program. We are really lucky to have you in Region 4 as our partner. This isn't, a lot of people think this is a bureaucratic relationship with the federal government. It is not. We talk on a weekly basis, and a lot of times it's daily. And so this is a true partnership with the EPA. And I'd be remiss not to actually thank each of you. The results of this 5-year program evaluation is because of you all in the council, that your vision to reorganize in this fashion is the reason why we are where we are in this particular evaluation. And so you started this. This is really your achievement. And those of us who have kind of been on this pathway with you know that this couldn't have happened without your vision and actually your bold decision-making back in 2014, 2015 to start this restructuring. So I just wanted to thank you and congratulate you because this is really your achievement. Staff just assembled the documents. You put it in place. So thank you.
Well, we need a motion to accept the findings and then to direct the staff to address the recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes.
Chair.
Yes.
So we don't have to thank, it's Dwayne to thank, really. I mean, great job, Dwayne, Frank, and Kathy on this. And I appreciate what you said about Jennifer, that, she does deserve thanks, but honestly, I deserve more thanks on that because I hired Jennifer when I was at EPA, even though she went to the University of Georgia, but, still. So, anyway, you're welcome.
Dwayne, take her to the longboard house and get her a surfboard. That way she'll be one of us full time. There you go.
Actually, didn't you make that request already, I think? I think we have that on our agenda for a field trip.
I'll go. I'd like to break from the agenda a little bit and add an issue in here. I want to be sure that we keep our staff in place here, and I'd like to request a motion from the council to ask the real, not the fake chairman, but the real chairman to begin negotiations with our executive director to keep them under contract. It's coming up, and I just, time is getting away from us, and before it gets too late, I want to be sure that our big chair begins those negotiations on our behalf. And I'd like to make that, if I can, as a fake chair, I'd like to make that in the form of a motion for the real chair.
Did you move, or I'll move?
All right, I'll accept that. You move it. Do I hear a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. We have a motion. With that, Dwayne, I think we knock it back to you for your report.
Okay, we've got an agenda item. This was initially pulled by Commissioner Fielding, and then we would have pulled it as staff. And so I want to give you kind of a brief overview, and then we have a procedural issue that we need to clarify as we move forward with this item that, we've talked to council as we're looking at contracting. We want to make sure we are all clear before you actually make a motion. And so this is not going to be a contract renewal. This is a term that staff use, but in order to be exactly procedurally correct, Carolyn will describe the action, and then I'll go through the contract. So Carolyn, you want to just, clarify where we are with this?
Sure. Just a point of clarification. We have entered into a contract, as you know, with Ideas to do the prior consulting services. If the board is going to go ahead and approve the services that are going to be proposed to you today, what I would recommend we do is amend that contract and bring those services under the existing contract. The services that are provided under our operating procedures are services that, even if they weren't publicly procured, are exempt from the public procurement requirements. However, as you know, when we originally entered into the contract with Ideas, we issued an RFP, it went out on the street, and we received proposals. The selection committee brought that contract to you for approval. And so I would just want to make it clear that we're going to utilize the provisions under the operating policies that provide for these types of services as being exempt from those procurement requirements, just because some of them are a little bit outside of the scope of the original RFP, and I just want to make sure that we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. So it's really not an issue that you have to worry about. It's more in how we designate the contract and how we approach it going forward. Again, it's more procedure on our end than yours, but I just wanted to make that clarification for the record.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I wonder if there would be some information that you might like to elaborate on.
Yes, in fact, thank you. I actually do. I'm going to show you two charts. So the first one, it should be on your screen, is the actual deliverables. And I want to really focus on two of those deliverables. They are all, we have a really good service from Ideas. They have been with us the whole way. But in this process of rebranding, one of the things that we identified as a challenge as we actually embrace that brand and make it real is this challenge of reaching to 45 cities and bringing that base of communities into not just the CCMP process, but how do we live that One Lagoon brand? And in talking to the cities and the leagues of cities, both Space Coast and Treasure Coast have been super helpful. And, what's unique about us is that identities are so unique. So, the 5 counties each have a unique identity. The 45 cities each see the lagoon in a little different way. And so what this contract is going to do, in the most important part in my mind, is to allow us to talk to each one of those 45 cities. So if you look at task 4, these audio core stories, we are going to come to each of the 5 counties and those 45 cities and have them talk to us and define their connection, the community connection to the lagoon, and which also gives me the ability to have one-on-one relationships start building. And I want to show you, when we can come back to this if you have task questions, how this all comes together. And so we already have a $100,000 contract running from Port Canaveral that's going to identify kind of those, what does the public know, how are their attitudes shaped, and most importantly, how do we message to get behavior change? Some of those issues like fertilizer bans. We have our CCMP action plans, and at the end of the day, that CCMP is just a piece of paper unless those 45 cities and that 1.7 million citizens, if we can get them all say, this plan, we want to do these things voluntarily, proactively, to move restoration forward. And then this communication and outreach to One Lagoon. Think of this, the Ideas guys call it brand enculturation. I see it more as identifying ourselves in that One Lagoon framework. And so I see this contract over the next 12 months coming together with the CCMP. Some of these tasks will help us with infographics. Some of these tasks are going to be reaching out to each of those communities. And in fact, those communities will have that audio spot for their own use, but we will use it on our website. And at the end of the year, we will have basically completed that brand penetration with what I think, and I may be old guard, but I have to tell you, emails don't do it for me. A lot of this is built on trust, and I know where we're moving forward, and a lot of it is because we have personal relationships. And I have done the numbers, and if you want me, and I know I need to do this year, for me to reach out to all 45 cities personally, it's a tough challenge to get that scheduled. This is going to actually force that activity through something that both is valuable and fun. So this would be second phase of this, brand development, and it's going to involve each of you and your counties as well as the cities. So I'm open for questions at any level on this.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
I wonder if it might be useful for us to use the league, whatever the other groups are called, of cities cumulative, and maybe schedule an opportunity. And of course, one of the things would be go as you're going for education, but also to make them know about these small grants and about the other areas of grants that we're hoping there will be application. That'll stir. And if you were to go to, as I say, the league meetings, then you'll have representatives, and it might, I'm not trying to discount meeting with whomever you wish to meet. You know that.
Yes.
You know how much I'm encouraging.
And I'm actually tracking exactly down your line. It's an easy way for access. Okay. And so with your direction to move forward with this contract, my next step is to contact the Space Coast and Treasure Coast League of Cities, get on their agenda to talk about the CCNP. I want them understanding where we're heading and also this opportunity. And then I see, because, you know, we have to, if we do these audio stories, we're going to need to do it, you know, it's a professional deal. You're going to bring them into not a sound room, but a room where you've got command and control. And an easy way to do that is at a league meeting where you can get many of the representatives there. And they need to think about this. And I've already started this process. So who speaks? You know, if I'm Brevard County, who would you put on a microphone to speak? Titusville, I bet you any amount of money it'll be Laura Lee Thompson at Dixie Crossroads, and then I see that kind of individual, almost historic opportunity to put somebody in front to showcase that connection. But we will use the League of Cities, and Councilwoman Wheeler, we've been talking to Deb Denny's. You know, we have an open invitation to, you know, the Volusia League of Cities. They haven't come on board the Management Council yet, but in that discussion, we'll be reaching out again to Volusia League of Cities. It is an efficient and effective way to get support.
I think that's an extremely important thing for us to do as you're using just what you've outlined, your talk, you outlined your CCMP, how that we are interacting, how they can be supportive of us and mutually, but then the availability of these specific, and especially as Jennifer emphasized, these specific small type grants that they can just sort of grab a hold of, and so I see that. So yes.
Great advice.
Yes, yes.
Yep. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
You want to roll right into number 11, reports and info?
We need action on this.
You do?
Move accept.
Motion, do we have a second? Second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. We have unanimous support. Item number 11, reports and information.
Okay, I'm going to be really brief. There's a couple things that you need to remember. First is that my annual review is due. I'll let Carolyn Ansay work with you all on that. You've already given direction to, you know, the chair to start negotiations, so I'm kind of assuming that you're going to keep me around for a little bit longer, but I'll let, you know, Carolyn kind of talk to you about the process, because this is a bylaw requirement that you do an annual review on me.
Thank you. As you recall, last year we did a probably overly formal employee executive director review. Some board members didn't complete it, some did, and we got some feedback as required under Dwayne's contract. You're now going into the final year of that 3-year contract, and you can, given the prior motion, you can determine that that's sufficient. Or we could do anything all the way up to a more formal evaluation as we did last year. It's really within your prerogative. I think after the first year, the thinking was we wanted to have something that was a little bit more formal, but, you know, do recognize that, you know, there's limited time amongst board members, and so some of those didn't come back. So it's up to you, however you'd like to do it. Again, all we need to check the box is that you've considered his performance, you find it satisfactory, and then again, given the motion that you made earlier, you could continue on with the negotiation process, but it's totally in your court.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
I believe it would be extremely useful for there to be a simplified response expected, but that we have opportunity to make suggestions or observations coupled with that simplified response. And move that we use that as our system to meet the requirement.
Just a comment from the chair. I just think we got superb staff. I personally, if unless it's required, I don't think we need anything, because I know how hard they all work. We couldn't have anybody any better. I just feel real blessed to have who we have. And I just think the minimum is necessary just to save time, energy, and funding, if that's required to do that. I just, you know when you got it right, and I know we got it right. And I'd rather spend our time and energy doing good work for the lagoon. That's just a comment from the chair. Any other comments? Any directions or motions?
Is there a decision we need, or I don't know?
Do we need anything at this juncture, Carolyn?
I guess from my perspective, what I need to know is if you would like me to transmit some form of a form out, or whether you would like to have the discussion today constitute the evaluation. What we could do that would differ from the process last year is I could try to pare down the form we used last year, distribute it all. To the degree board members would like to complete it, they can. To the degree board members feel that their comments today are sufficient, you don't want to spend a lot of time me trying to track people down and collect evaluations. We just submit them, you return them to me, and they can be provided. That would be one way of approaching it. Again, it's up to y'all.
I have an idea. So given that we authorize the chair to renegotiate his contract, I say we consider our comments as pass, you know, as a favorable review. But, you know, also, I think it'd be worthwhile, just I know that as an employee, I appreciate feedback. So it'd be good for you to send us some simpler form just to tickle us, to say, hey, you can provide Dwayne feedback as it goes forward, and then we can optionally choose to provide feedback, which I know Dwayne would appreciate if we did.
Do we need that as a motion?
Sure.
Second?
Got a motion and a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Yeah,
No, that's great. And I'll just suggest that what's most useful to me is not the accolades, but, you know, the how we can do things better. So if you see, I don't believe I interact with you all individually enough. Some of that's just time constraints, but those are the kinds of things that how we get better, that's the most useful to me and my staff as we move forward. And thank you. Two other things. The December all-hands meeting, I think that's really, really important, and I don't want to diminish that. Even though we're going to have an abbreviated agenda for business, it's the one time a year that you as council will get to have a room with all of our management conference volunteers who decide to show. We do have a number of awards that are going to be given out, but what we are working on right now diligently is to have that very, very popular annual calendar and the annual report ready to go before session. And so, you know, it's a lot of work. Kathy's working diligently on the annual report, but we're going to showcase some of the projects that local communities, especially the counties, you as investors, are doing. So when she reaches out and says, give us some of your real high priority stuff that's going on that may not be funded, you know, directly by, you know, the NEP, let us know. So for example, in Volusia, you know, I see us showcasing the reasonable assurance plan, because that is a big effort that's going to contribute greatly to our effort. So by all means, encourage staff to respond. So far, it's been good. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, I was just in Tallahassee on Wednesday. It was a request by Representative Placencia, who created the new Florida House caucus for the Indian River Lagoon. And while it's premature to talk about any bills specifically, I'm excited about bills that are in draft right now on behalf of the Indian River Lagoon. And so you have given me good guidance to support your position statement, and you have a copy of that in your file, and you'll notice we have tweaked it a little bit. There's nothing controversial that required additional, you know, comments, but we really toned it down so it's easy to read. I think we could have some historic bills moving through session, and so I will be contacting the counties. I work closely with Drew and the water management districts like we did last year. But as soon as those bills are filed, I will be contacting each of you to let you know what's moving forward. And there are a number of bills that could transform kind of what I call the important deal, which is local cost share support of projects. And so I'll keep you posted as we go, but there is strong consensus and support within that House caucus that really pleases me, and it's a move forward at a level that I had not seen, including yesterday getting a letter from Representative Placencia's office, and he's moving a draft letter as we speak among the caucus to send to Congress to make sure that they know that this caucus is supportive of our position statement on Everglades restoration funding and NEP funding. So good news from Tallahassee. We'll keep you posted. That's all I have.
All right. Go to item number 12, any other council member reports? Anybody in the council have a report? No.
I'll try to be concise, very concise. I think we had some excellent reports today from Dr. Jacoby and from Ms. Drum, and they were concise and useful in what I see conveying information in a context, a format that allowed us as laymen to better understand the implications and therefore then be in a better position to make decisions and view alternatives. So I want us to incorporate some of the ways they approach their reports today in our request as we have people coming forward that were wanting grants. So when we're dealing with the current data, we want to know what kind of a range that might be. We want to know what are the implications of that data, and when these projects are accepted and funded, we want to know the outcome. The outcome's not going to be a secret. We want to know the outcome. We want to know the outcome in operable detail. We want to know what in the world does this mean? How can it be useful for us? So we want to know the outcome of the study, possible implementation of the study. And the other thing, and I guess Frank or Kathy, I don't know who might be doing, but we want to have, when we do approve these applications, I would encourage us strongly that they come back before the board in such a format that we would be able to review and evaluate. It would be subsequent to the management board and subsequent to the STEM, but come back to the council so that we can review and that we can then evaluate the potential applicants. So that was, thank you, sir. Sure. Appreciate it.
Kathy?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. I did just want to mention that last week we had a ribbon cutting for Calkins Water Farm down in Martin County, and it's a fantastic project. Senator Negron was there, as well as several other dignitaries, and so we're looking forward to that being online and helping with the situation.
Mr. Chair, Kathy, I have a request. Could you make sure we're on the mailing list for those ribbon cuttings? That one may have come to me and I missed it, but that one I would have been at if I was aware of it. And it's an exciting project, that one.
It is.
Yeah, great. I mean, that's a lot of water that can be moved off the C-44 instead of going into the St. Lucie estuary. So that's great. I wanted to talk about our budget request because the department did submit its budget request. And it's going to take, and I'll get Dwayne the material so we can distribute it to you guys, but it's going to take effort to make sure we get that budget request because it will benefit the lagoon tremendously. We asked for $50 million again for septic to sewer, large-scale stormwater projects. Obviously that's something we need to do for the lagoon. We also asked for $306 million for Everglades and Northern Everglades restoration. That is unprecedented. That has never been asked for before. And with the events we're seeing right now, it is obvious that we need it. So that's going to be a big, hard push to get $306 million for all those important SERP and restoration projects down south. So, and then The third piece that is new to our budget that I haven't talked to y'all before is we have a coastal resiliency request in, and that will include $600,000 in additional planning grants for local entities like the NEP, like regional planning councils or counties, to have a better understanding on how to prepare for sea level rise, how to prepare for our changing coastal conditions, more intense storms, those types of things. That is not done across the state. It is done in parts of the state, and it's very informative. What roads do we need to worry about? What stormwater features do we need to worry about? What natural features do we need to worry about? But having that granular resolution at the local level is critically important. We're staffing up in our coastal office to try to get better coordination and assistance out. But as we think about coastal resiliency, we're making a push as a department to get increased funding in that realm as well. So look for that. I'll get that to you, Dwayne, and any kind of local support on helping us get that funding would be very appreciated.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Thinking back to last year's session where I had a number of requests from our local partners, and then listening to Drew, I would very much like board consideration of a motion to give me authority on your behalf to speak, if called upon, on behalf of the DEP budget, bills that are related to the Indian River Lagoon, not to pick and choose one project over another. But I had some calls last year from legislators to be in committee. I tried to, not, support a specific bill. So I wasn't saying, pass it, don't pass it, but I would talk to the value of a bill to the Indian River Lagoon, but I felt like it was in some gray area. I am not a registered lobbyist. I don't want to be a registered lobbyist. I think it's not in our best interest. But when I'm called on to be able to speak, to the factual nature, I really would like to have your, direct authorization to do that. Because I do have some judgment calls there that made me a little bit uncomfortable last year in some of the subcommittees, especially as they related to some large policies that impact regulation. But I want some guidance from you all on that.
If I may, two things. One, I think maybe just express a general consensus that yes, that's the consensus of the board, that you have the availability, the consensus of not a vote. Okay, I'm trying to protect the situation, So the consensus of a situation. Second, encouraging each member of the council to take down the information about the DEP budget, and each one of us in our particular station then offer support through the counties can do it more readily, I guess. I don't know how, I don't know that the districts can do that, but the counties can do that to offer support directly for the $600,000 in resiliency. You said 50 million, and was that primarily septic sewer for IRL?
Septic to sewer, stormwater,
and
there's another piece in there.
So
yeah, but it's for water infrastructure.
Water infrastructure?
Yeah, it's called water infrastructure.
And it was 306?
306 million for
306.
Everglades, yeah, and Northern Everglades restoration.
For Northern Everglades. Okay, and I would like us again to have that as a consensus. I don't believe DEP can vote on that, but if you can, then we'll vote on it.
Well, I would suggest take it and use it. The governor will come out with his budget request, and so our budget request may alter.
Yeah.
Not sure what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But you can, I would certainly encourage everyone to start rallying around those concepts.
Good. So that was a request that we become aware of our potential inputs that we can provide as counties on behalf of DEP. And as Dwayne you will keep us more abreast of the other things that are coming so that we can stay on top of that as well. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
I'm surprised, maybe I've been asleep at the wheel, that you don't have authority to speak in our behalf. That's what.
Well, I do, but it has been very broad. So in our position statement, it's really general. So additional funding for Everglades, additional funding, recurring funds, for, Indian River Lagoon. But when I get a phone call and say, come on up and talk about a septic to sewer inspection bill, which came up last year, then I'm feeling like I'm kind of in a little gray territory. And I am very, very careful, having been in Tallahassee, not to cross that lobby threshold line. And I'm there as a scientist, as your executive director, for information, and not to, advise a vote in one direction or another. But I suspect that, I'm feeling that this could be one of those historic sessions. I'm not sure which direction it goes, but I do want to make sure that we are all in agreement about how comfortable you are with me in Tallahassee as this moves forward.
I would entertain from anybody a motion to allow him to speak on our behalf.
So here's the, he needs to go up there and tell people what the Indian River Lagoon needs. He needs to go tell them what our challenges are. He needs to say what will solve our challenges. It gets much more awkward if us as an entity say, go support this bill or don't support this bill, or, that just is a whole nother different sort of lens that gets, that's riskier, right?
Absolutely.
So he need, so that, and I certainly was there with Dwayne when he had to do those types of things, and he did a great job for us, telling him what the lagoon needs and everything, without having to sort of step out on our behalf and say support or don't support. So you get the message. He does deliver the message of what we need to have happen, but you got to take care, and because who knows what it will be when something comes up that one of our members on this council really isn't keen on. So it's hard to give you specific direction unless you come up with to a council meeting, which we probably don't meet enough, and say, here's a bill, should I support it or not? So that's, without that direction, it's hard for us to tell them, yeah, go support whatever bill you think you should support, right?
And this is adequate for what I need, just as a point of process. And this is happening actually, last year. Each of the counties have lobbyists for the most part, and also staff that are intergovernmental staff. And some of the counties I worked with last session, gosh, on almost a weekly basis, and not all were quite as conversant or connected with me. St. Johns River Water Management District, worked on a regular basis, and so, that doesn't happen unless you as, commissioners and council members direct staff to make sure you're coordinating, with the NEP, then you can have a lobbyist lobbying for your individual project, but also have the support of the NEP and the broader issues that may need to be discussed in committee or subcommittee as it relates to that project. And that's a good way to handle this.
And Chair, I wasn't trying to confuse the issue. What I was trying to do was not put individuals that are in agencies that aren't allowed to do certain things into a box. That's what I was trying to avoid, the box.
But at the same time, I've lobbied Washington and Tallahassee professionally now. It's my 40th year. And there are times, even though I never had carte blanche from my governing board representing, at that time, 1,500 growers in 6 counties, I would be in the midst of a very critical bill that needed that one last little push from an ag entity, and you're there. And that little push, and for you, it'd be a lagoon issue, where you stepping out of your comfort zone gets something so critical and so wonderful for our lagoon. Shoot, I think good leadership, you hire the right people and you delegate authority to them if you trust them. And we can't have better staff and trust than we have with the staff we have here. And I just think at certain times, if Dwayne's up there and something is so important to getting funding for this lagoon and his silver tongue can get it done, I'm all for letting him have that authority. So that's just my personal opinion from this fake chair.
And Mr. Chair, there's an important point that I have to make, that, you know, the way we're structured as a NEP, you know, our staff salary don't come out of federal funds. Our staff salary comes out of the local contribution, which allows me to actually do that kind of work on your behalf. Federal funds cannot be used for lobbying. They can't be used for, you know, influencing either at the federal level, and I would argue probably at the state level there's still a lot of issues. And so we are very careful to not cross those dollars. Our federal funding is going to, you know, Clean Water Act and acceptable uses at the federal level. None of those dollars are used in any of our discussions with either congressional or state legislators.
Yeah.
So, and Doug, I'm with you. Dwayne is smart enough to see this a landmine.
Yep.
You know, so so if he sees, okay, I could take a position here, but I could make, you know, it could be awkward. You know, he knows who to call and how to sort through it.
And let me just add to that too. You're right, like that foresight, because that did not occur to me at the very beginning. And then I was like, oh wait, there are so many more limitations when you use 320 funds to pay salaries. And I was so thankful that he did have that foresight in the beginning, so that he has a lot more flexibilities and can, you know, leverage this NEP much differently than other NEP executive directors can, because I don't know of any other executive director who is not paid for out of 320. So, you know, that foresight was very intuitive.
With that, any other comments from the council?
We can move adjourn if you're ready.
Dwayne, are we ready to adjourn, or are we?
Oh, we got to do.
You need to cancel
Our
November 10th
board
optional meeting.
Right.
Move to cancel.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. We have that canceled, and then we go on to our next meeting will be December the 8th, 9:30, right here at the council chambers.
That's correct.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're done.
Thank you all.